And we're live. So this is the Web Technologies Hangout. Just a bunch of developers who work remotely getting together and talking about web technologies. I'm Jonathan Belcher. I am a JavaScript electrical wizard at Automatic, and I work on WooCommerce.com. Peyton?
I'm Peyton. I am a code wrangler, JavaScript and PHP, and I also work at Automatic.
I am Daniel, and I also work at Automatic, and I'm a JavaScript developer.
Cool. Let's also say where we are. I'm in Philadelphia.
Oh, I'm in Burlington, Vermont.
I'm in Spain.
All right. I'm going to be in Spain in 2 months in Barcelona. I'm pretty excited about it. My first time in Spain.
Cool.
Yeah. I wanted to start with New Year's resolutions and what I'm going to try and do this year, and then we could go around, and then if anybody has anything interesting, or if you don't have anything and think New Year's resolutions are stupid, just let me know. But I've been with Automatic since April, and during that time I'm relearning PHP and WordPress. Apparently my five to 7 years of very light interaction with PHP, my skills were very dull. So I think I'm finally at a point where I understand things again.
Yeah, that happened to me too.
Yeah, and then also I previously worked using Polymer, and so React was new to me. So I feel like I finally have a grasp on React, and I have an opening to learn something else, and I would like to do some more computer science heavy things. So I think I'm going to take a Udacity or a Coursera course on just like the basics of computer science, since I only took 2 computer science courses in university. And then my other is that I'm going to blog once a week. And so those are the 2 things I'm going to do. And I have a new blog that has 0 posts on it. And so later today, I'll have my first post out. It's
nice.
Belcher.blog. Oh,
nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I have Peyton.codes, which used to be updated every week, but it hasn't been much lately. Trying to get back into that.
Yeah. Man, I wonder if like Belcher.codes is available. It's like just as an alias.
Yeah, my coworker and friend Mel Choice has I think like melchoice.design or something, or designs, and I was like, oh wow, that's so cool. Yeah. And so I discovered .codes exists.
I love the new that you can get a TLD with pretty much anything you want, and you don't have to worry about this like getting an IO to seem cool, or
Although it's weird. There's weird things like .coffee exists, but not .tea.
Yeah.
Like it's like a lot of things that like there's a lot of TLDs, but I guess there's always going to be ones that are missing.
Yeah, and like somebody has to go through the process of getting it set up, and
yeah. My guess is the coffee industry has more money than the tea industry, and more incentives.
Well, as Americans, we would probably think that. I wonder. I guess that's probably true.
Yeah. More tea is drunk, but I don't think they
coffee.
Yeah.
I
don't have anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were resoluting.
No, and those are the 2 things I want to do. I guess it's on the personal note. Every Sunday, I want to get all of the laundry done and folded and put away. Like that. Whenever I do that, I can start the week and on a really positive note, and I just feel really, really good starting. And I wasn't able to do that last year. baby and wife being pregnant and all that fun stuff. But this year we're getting back to that.
Nice. I guess I usually don't do year resolutions because I'm always coming up with new plans. But generally speaking, in terms of programming and such, I always have this plan to blog more. And usually my best blog posts come out of conversations I'm having with other people where I'm trying to explain something I'm working on. I'm like, hey, that would actually be a really good blog post. So I should probably just have more of those conversations, or try to have more conversations. So maybe that's a thing so I can do, is try to discuss what I'm doing or what I'm interested in more with other people, particularly people who don't understand it. But also I really am excited about, and this will probably come up later, about how not React specifically, but React like declarative programming and being able to and also serializing those blocks and components, because it's something that we're going to be working on with WordPress. So
absolutely, yeah, we will definitely want to talk about that. So about having conversations, that was primarily the main reason that I wanted to start doing this, is because at my previous job, we would all sit and have lunch together, and we would talk about the problems that we were having, and then if there was something interesting, one of us would bring it up, and we got into really heated discussions, and everybody was sort of worried that we were fighting and that we were always fighting. But really it was just heated discussions on potential architectures and ways of doing things. And I found that was a really positive way. It was very positive for me to understand how to articulate the problems that I face, and then help me understand to be other points of view to make me a better developer. And yeah, so conversations, and actually it's actually a great idea, is blogging about a conversation you're having helps you understand the problem better, because then you're not just, if you're just sitting there having a conversation, you may say a lot of things and it's like, do I really understand how that works? But when you actually have to put it down on paper, yeah, it's a little bit more, it needs to be more thought through and a little bit more, yeah, you know what I mean?
It helps.
Yeah. And I also wonder, a lot of times, one thing I'd like to do more of, and I did it once or twice this year, is I would go to a meetup and someone would be having a problem or an issue and they wanted me to help them solve it. And then, a couple weeks later, somebody else would be having the same problem. And so I never recorded, or I never took away an artifact from that conversation that I could then share with someone else. Yeah. And so every conversation I have where I help someone through a problem, it needs to somehow be recorded, or I need to ask them, say, hey, go to Stack Overflow, ask the question, and I'll go answer it. Or hey, I'm going to write a blog post about this, and then that'll help you answer the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And then Daniel.
So this wasn't like hard New Year's
no.
resolution.
Are you getting feedback too, Peyton?
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Daniel was speaking and I couldn't understand him. But if Peyton, if you can hear him, then I think.
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah.
Oh, it's my end then. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Daniel.
So it just happens that now we got the .blog domains. So it's New Year's, but it's not really a New Year resolution. I want to start blogging, and it's gonna be now because I got the domain.
Nice.
I don't even know what to blog about. I feel that if I do only technical stuff, then the blog is gonna be like really like maybe once a month or something like that.
Yeah, I have that problem too. I have two blogs.
Like personal and professional.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I have one that's about programming, and I have one that's about tea, actually, because it's one of my hobbies. So, and I have had other ones in the past, but yeah, and I think that for me that's really helpful, because then I don't feel like I have to be always. I could just have one blog that's just like everything, I guess, which would be okay too. But
Yeah, I don't know. I will try to figure it out. I want to learn to touch type.
oh, cool. Yeah.
With a whooping 27 years old, I want to learn to touch type now.
Okay,
So
so and if you're going to do that, why not do Colmac or
I tried
Vork?
I tried the Vorak for a little bit, but I can reasonably type in QWERTY and at a reasonable speed, like maybe 40 or 50 words per minute, like a hand pecker, like
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
two fingers. So I feel that it will be easier to just learn to touch type using QWERTY. And if I damage my wrists or something like that, then I will I will learn to type in Colmac or whatever. But I think it's too early to just go all in to a different layout. So after that, I won't even know how to type in any other laptop in the world, just on mine or on my weird keyboards or whatever.
That's been my challenge, is that whenever I've tried to use different layout, then my brain starts getting really confused whenever I have to use anyone else's computer. I know you can switch layouts, but still.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm that's something else I want to do. And I know that if I said, "Hey, my productivity is gonna," if I wanted to practice 2 hours a day, during my job, that I feel like that everybody would be like, "Oh, you're gonna slow down for like a week or two while you learn Comac." That's cool. I feel like we're at a company that values the different keyboard layouts.
It's true.
But yeah, I definitely want to do that too, because I am an extremely slow typer, and I about 50% touch type. I mean, I can if I need to, but most of the time I'm looking at my keyboard and I don't know why. And I feel like doing a completely different layout is the only way for me to like fully touch type. I don't know. So
Well, but most of the time when you are coding, you are not really limited by your typing ability. So
I know.
I think that's kind of an overkill for us.
Yeah.
Unless we want to like do creative writing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're typing, if you're limited by your typing speed, then you're probably not doing it right. Okay, so why don't we circle back? Howdy. Oh, there's your video.
Oh, there it is.
Do you have mic? No. All right. Well, it's good to see you. Maybe next week. So Peyton, let's talk about the React and React-like systems, and you describe them as declarative architectures or declarative.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The words are hard to use because Polymer and web components are also declarative in a way, in that they're HTML, which is a declarative language. You say what you want to happen, and it just happens. When you're using web components, and but the implementation of the web component itself is is pretty close to the DOM. I mean, it is directly using the DOM.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when building web components, you're doing kind of imperative programming, and then when you're composing them, you're using more of a declarative nature. And in this sense, I'm defining declarative as that you want you say what you want without having to say how you want it done, and and then it's like magic. It happens hypothetically. So versus imperative, where you actually explain how you want something to be done. So if you yeah. So in this case, one of the things I like about React and React-like systems is that there's that you describe you can describe your data, the state of your application. I mean, this isn't, you don't. There are ways to not use React this way, but this is kind of how we're using it. You describe the state of your system as like a data structure, and then your components react. I mean, that's why it's called that, to the data, and create HTML. This is the thing, is that they kind of work. Like you could use, it seems to me, you could use React to kind of activate components you built out of web components, which would be an interesting use that I haven't seen anywhere. But
there's a lot of people talking about it, and I think Adi Asmani's done some stuff around that, and the idea behind leaf nodes. So, your trunk, your branches, and all that fun stuff is all just pure React, pure JavaScript. And then once you get down to the nitty-gritty of pushing out HTML, your buttons, your input fields, your all the display things, that those leaf nodes, the leaves, are all web components. And I think it's certainly interesting. I'd like to see it implemented. That's the tough part about all this, is I would love to see someone else implement it before I try to go and implement it. And unfortunately, at some point in your career, you have to be the person that goes out and tries something first, because you get to the point where, hey, you're on that cutting edge, and like, somebody's got to do it first, and somebody has to. There's lots of people that I'm sure have done it. It's just there's not a ton of it open sourced.
Yeah, and it hasn't. Nothing has kind of sparked the collective like imagination. Like like before Redux, for example, to take a near topic, there were like 100 Flux implementations, and some of them were popular and some of them were not popular, and but everybody had their own, basically. And then just there, this one came out, which was like, everybody was like, yeah, that's really what we like. That really seems to be the thing, and people were talking about it everywhere. And so then now it's easy to kind of, if you were coming to that, people would say, oh, well, you want to learn about Redux. You can find a million articles about it now. And I feel like that, for web component, for certain uses of web components, I haven't seen that much. It's like people haven't really, there hasn't been an agreed upon. I mean, other than Polymer itself, there haven't been a lot of excitement about it lately.
Well, I think that as leaf nodes, like, the reason that there's no really, really, really killer feature, like, does it save me time? Does it make my app faster? Does it, does it do, what does it do for me? And the problem is that right now, I don't think it does a whole lot for you, rather than just writing, JSX.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, you were saying something?
Yeah, that right now you can't really use web components anyway, right? It has to be polyfill, like, for every browser that is not Chrome.
So I've used Polymer and web components in production on some very, very large systems. You can use it today. It is in Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. The only thing that isn't in Firefox and Safari is the HTML imports. And the reason the HTML imports isn't there is because Microsoft wants to see what the module syntax, like how we use that, and determine if HTML imports is redundant, because it does a very similar thing to modules. So that's why that hasn't been implemented. Edge hasn't implemented it, and then of course IE11, 10, whatever you need to go back to, they're not implemented. So what the community did is said, hey, let's polyfill this, and so everybody seems very concerned about the polyfills. The polyfill with the Polymer library is extremely small. I think it's something like 15K. And that is it's not a complete polyfill. Before Polymer 1.0, they had a full-on polyfill for the Shadow DOM, and that was like 50K, and it was slow. And the team that works on Polymer said, "Hey, we just can't do this until Shadow DOM is implemented. We can't polyfill this. This just doesn't make any sense." So what they came up with is the Shady DOM, which I think is the best naming ever. And the Shady DOM is a shim, right? So the difference between a shim and a polyfill is a shim approximates the effect. A polyfill is feature complete. It has, it works exactly the same way. So it's a shim, and what it does is that shim goes through and namespaces everything, so to do everything it possibly can to make sure that your CSS isn't leaky. It still leaks because it's just they just can't. It's really, really, really tough to polyfill, and it's just not worth it. So today, if you want to use web components, you can polyfill them. However, you're going to use Shady DOM instead of the Shadow DOM, and you don't get full CSS encapsulation.
Shady DOM, I love that.
I know, it's awesome. Whoever came up with that was a genius. And so like Polymer is I talk a lot with React developers because I work with all React, we do all React at Automatic, about Polymer, and web components and React are different things. But Polymer and React are very similar in that if you saw a component as a black box and you looked at it from the outside, they're very, 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 very similar. The API is a little bit different, but you could almost you could set it up in a way if you wanted to. You could have interchangeable Polymer and React components. It doesn't make any sense to do that, but they're very similar in that way. If you wanted to use Redux with Polymer, it would absolutely work. And the apps that I've worked on was pre-Redux, and so I implemented a system where a component fires an event, and then that event gets caught by a I don't know if it would be a dispatcher, but it gets caught by the data store, and then it says, okay, what do I do with this action? And it takes that and it updates the global state, and then that global state updates the properties on the top level Polymer element, and then it goes all the way down, and the DOM updates. And Polymer's, what's that?
That's basically Redux.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it wasn't functional. It wasn't one JavaScript object, So, I mean, it had the feel of Redux, but it certainly was not Redux. It was the Shady DOM version of Redux. It worked, but it wasn't great. So with all of those things is, Polymer and React both are very, very similar in that if you treat them like black boxes, they're almost indistinguishable. And I do love, so I really like React, and it has a lot of advantages over Polymer, and Polymer has advantages over React. But one thing I really loved is that I could write a Polymer element, and I could jQuery style put a script tag on the page that included Polymer, and I could put I could do an HTML import for my Polymer component, and then I could just use the thing on the page. And
yeah, they're a lot more portable.
Oh yeah, they're so portable, so easy to use, and like the number of pre-made elements. There doesn't seem to be as much of that in the React community. I would think when I first came on, I was to React. I was like, where's this huge library of React components that I can just go and like, I need a React component to display a calendar. Like I found a couple, but they were all grouped up inside of like Material React or in some sort of other bundle of components. I wanted an individual jQuery style plugin that I could just go and grab and I could pull into my project. And I just didn't find that. There's tons of those out there for Polymer. And so like using the Google Map Polymer element, you put a Google Map on the page and you give it a JavaScript object of all the pins that you want to put on a page, and it just displays them all. And I was like, holy crap. I built in a couple hours, I worked with a team. We took a Philadelphia open data set, and then we mapped all of the crime in the city onto a Google Map. We didn't really know what we were doing. Well, we didn't realize that the data set was so big, it being Philadelphia. And so we ended up crashing the browser, and so we had to filter down the object a little bit. But yeah, we were pumping like 10,000 pins to a Google Map using Polymer element in like no time at all. Sorry, cool. That's my rant. So you were talking about other React style implementations. Have you looked at any of them yet, or?
Yeah, I mean, Preact is very interesting. We were talking in a private channel earlier about Preact and Inferno, which both seek to re-implement the React API, mostly with a slightly different focus. And I think that's fascinating, because what excites me most about React is really the idea of stateless functional components, is the ability of writing a function which outputs basically HTML, and or in this case JSX, which is effectively a version of HyperScript. That it's just like takes input and gives output, simple functions, and then composing those functions to create an interface, which and that they operate entirely on just data. I mean, at least theoretically, there's very little DOM stuff that goes on, and I think that it's interesting to see what other people are starting. Just now, I think it's just really starting to become a topic of popular discussion, what people are experimenting with in that field. Because so Preact takes the standpoint that, well, let's say most, this is my interpretation of it, let's say most people who want to make a React application want it to be a web app, and they're just doing web stuff. So why don't we trim down React to make it just for web, which it was originally. In fact, Preact in a lot of ways it makes me think of like, this is what React, like the very first version probably was more like. Of course, it has several of its own optimizations. It doesn't use synthetic event handlers, preferring instead the direct DOM handlers, which has certain advantages, but also certain things like select elements where the DOM kind of has to be the source of truth become a little bit weird sometimes. And then it adds a few things which have kind of become standards from the React community. For example, if you can, instead of using class name to describe the class name of your DOM nodes, you can use class, which is how you would write it in HTML. And if you do, and you provide it an object, it will, instead of a string, it will use behavior similar to the class names NPM module, which is a module that's very popular to join class names. So so basically, if you say class equals, and then you give it an object that's like is visible true, and is active false or something like that. I don't know. It would say, it would just have is visible in the class name. So you can provide the class, you can set your CSS classes with data, which I do in most all of my React projects anyway, but they built it right in. They also do another thing where they send for any class component, they pass the props of that component directly into the render method, which is how it works for stateless functional components. So it makes it easier to switch between stateless functional components and class components, which sometimes happens because often when I'm developing a component, I'll start with a stateless functional component, and then as I need lifecycle methods, I'll add them. But then I have to change. Oh, every time now I have to change all the props to this dot props, which is, I mean, you could do. There are other ways to do that, but it's just another step, and so they just do that by default because it doesn't hurt anything. React's render method receives no props, or receives no arguments. So that's another neat thing. So people are experimenting with this API in ways that I think are exciting. Inferno takes a slightly different tack, which I haven't really explored a lot, but similar sort of thing. They're just playing with different ideas. I think one of the things I read that they did is they attach lifecycle methods to stateless functional components, which is kind of neat, because then you can just, instead of having to switch to using a whole class, you can just add on lifecycle methods for the things that you need. So
yeah, I like how just like the Flux implementation, it is not considered this is the end all be all. Yeah. It is, here's an implementation, let's figure out how to do this, and then there were 50 of them, and now there is Redux.
Yeah.
I mean, and then with React itself, we're now getting additional implementations, and things from these additional implementations are making their way back into main React, right? I mean, Facebook hired Abramoff, Dan.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true. And they hired I think the Inferno guy also.
Yeah. And I think that's great. I think that it's an amazing, it's amazing for Facebook because they're making all their stuff better. But like as a community, we've been able to make this, work, and we've been able to get all the tools that we need without having to, and Facebook being open enough where they're allowing this external input into something that they technically control.
Yeah, that's the other interesting thing about Preact and Inferno is that they have different licenses than React. I think that that this is really, for me, the most exciting thing about React is not React. It's the concepts that React implements, and I like to see that now being, like you said, explored by the community.
Yeah.
Experimented with.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's amazing. So I had a couple of other things on my list. Jen Simmons did a blog post about rebuilding Firefox in Rust. So that we've all known that that's been going on for a while, but it's really, really interesting that they're not going to replace Gecko. They're just not going to pull it out and then put in the new Rust implementation. What was it called?
Servo, I think.
Yes, Servo. So they're not going to just like take one out and put one in, and like from one version to the next version, it's not going to be just like completely different. They are going to piecemeal remove the things that Gecko does and replace it with the things that Servo does over time, and then all of a sudden, presumably a couple of years from now, Firefox will be completely, the engine underneath will be completely Rust.
That's cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. And like the title of the blog post is "Replacing the Jet Engine While Still Flying." I hope it seems like a crazy thing, and I understand why they're doing it. It seems super difficult. They're way smarter than me.
People are really excited about Rust. I know. I haven't really played with it myself, but
yeah,
it seems like if you were doing a lot of code that you would be writing C for, that's a real appealing alternative now.
Yeah. What's his name? He's the one of the core developers of Ember. He was a core developer on jQuery. Yeah, I'm not going to remember. God, I love his talks. I'll remember it in a bit. Yeah, like Rust is super interesting. I've any like blog article, something about Rust, I'll read it just because it's interesting. But I wouldn't attempt to understand or actually use it for anything. I'm not sure I would have anything to use it on. I don't think I'd have anything to use C on. So
yeah, I haven't used C in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the understanding is that there is no reason to use C now. I mean,
yeah,
why wouldn't you use Rust or Go or
yeah,
Rust and Go basically?
Yeah. Or theoretically Swift if it penetrates more into other markets.
Yeah. Yehuda Katz was who I was talking about. I can't believe I blanked on his name.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything that Yehuda says is awesome. Then I'm like, I gotta look at this thing because every talk I've heard him give, I'm like, yeah.
Well, he cares a lot about the developer experience as well as the performance experience of things. It's one of the things that really drew me to Ruby back in the day was that it was a language that really seemed to care about developers.
Yeah. No.
And now every language is doing that. So.
Yeah, I was on Twitter the other day, and there was some backlash on that as well. It's like, at what point does developer experience? Oh, at what point do we optimize developer experience over performance of an app?
Over users.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, ultimately, you need to consider the user, but I think that that in balance they can go hand in hand, because if your developers are happy, then they can make better user experiences faster and easier, versus if your developers are frustrated and creating bugs with a poor development experience, then you're going to have unhappy users. But yeah, obviously you don't want to, especially with performance, you don't want to create a massive bloated thing. I mean, you could argue that Dreamweaver is a very developer-friendly way of making websites.
Yeah,
just drag and drop. Super easy.
Yeah.
That's a reference I haven't heard in a long time.
I started there. That was my first website. Well, no, my first website was before that, but
I mean, it was very popular, and it's interesting to look at the good reasons why it was very popular. Clearly it met, and in many ways that model still meets a need which people have, which is that that writing, even in a declarative language like HTML, is complicated, especially when you want to visually see what you're getting.
Yeah. So I have a question. When you're writing HTML and CSS, what do you start? So what I do is I go through and I write out the DOM. Like what, here's all of the divs, and here are the link tags, and here, I'm not talking about React because, when you're writing a component, it's just like real small. But what do you do? I write the HTML, and then I will write the CSS, and then I will see what it looks like. And I found that I've gotten better at doing that, but that's the method I go through. Daniel, how do you do it?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I first do like Web 1.0, like with raw tags and stuff, and make sure it's all functional, and then make it pretty to the best of my abilities, which is not much, but yeah, I try to do the CSS afterwards, and try to put as little CSS into HTML as possible. I mean, I don't see the point of having a single HTML tag have like 4 class names. Like for me, that just defeats the purpose, because you are really coding the styling information inside the HTML.
Yeah.
But I've seen that done a lot, so I guess there's some convention over that. So
I think that there's just this idea that we've been told not to mix our semantic markup and our styling, and so it's like the advanced way of cheating. We have a bunch of class names to describe our things, and as long as it doesn't say something like a color name or something, everybody thinks it's okay. But yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah. I like to give something a class, and then in my CSS, whether it be Sass or something else, I'd like to do that in the CSS rather than give yourself the bootstrapification of your HTML class. You have to give it like 15 classes, and then it does everything for you. I like to give it one class name, and then in the Sass, at import whatever it is that you need in that CSS class.
Yeah, and Sass mixins actually give you a good mechanism to do that.
Yeah.
In raw CSS, it's a little bit harder.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. I get really, really excited about CSS variables, and it's coming. So you won't need to do basically many of the things that Sass does for us will not be needed. You'll be able to use variables and mix-ins and all that fun stuff. That's all it's in CSS3. And those features will be implemented, over time. So that's really exciting. And they're in Chrome and I think Firefox. So, Safari probably next year when 11 comes out, and then Edge sometime in the future. So that's really, really exciting. Another thing I learned when doing some research on CSS variables and when we could use them, I just actually looked at this week for a conversation. There is no such thing as CSS4. It is CSS3, and then they're going to continue to add. It's just CSS, and they're going to continue to add features, but they're not going to put out a CSS4.
They're not even gonna go the JavaScript style and go with the year, and so it's just CSS.
Yeah, it's just CSS, and they're going to add things to the standard, and then as they add things to the standard, the browsers will do the implementation. But there's not going to be any CSS4.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good thing because then on all of our resumes, we don't have to list CSS4 to get a job. Because like, I mean, if you get an email from a recruiter, like 9 times out of 10, it's going to have CSS3 in the like. This is a requirement to work with us. Is you need to know CSS3, and I always
And,
laugh because it's like that's CSS.
and don't forget HTML5
Oh,
for whatever reason.
HTML5. Oh yeah. Oh, good times. Um, so yeah. So there was also an interesting link here. It's from it's called JavaScript New Year's Resolutions Countdown from Eric Elliott. Has anybody read Eric Elliott's stuff before?
I don't think so.
He is real. He's really, really, really smart JavaScript developer, but he's also a fairly prolific writer, and he talks a lot about class and prototypical architecture, and like he really helped me learn a lot of those things, and his stuff is really, really good. But I really liked his New Year's resolutions, and the first one was, or they're not his, but they're recommendations for JavaScript developers. And the top number 10 is master the JavaScript interview. And a lot of times when I interviewed a lot of developers for front end, and it was really interesting to find that an Angular developer had no idea, what the most basic things are within JavaScript. And so, like anybody I talk to that considers themselves a front end developer, it's like you have to know JavaScript. You need to know more than React and know more than Angular or Ember. Those things are completely unimportant compared to knowing JavaScript, at least in today's world. And so the resources that he has are: what is a closure? What is a pure function? What is functional programming? What is function composition? And what is the difference between class and prototypical inheritance? And then 10 interview questions every developer should know. And go through those. And even if you're not looking for a job, those are still amazing resources that are absolutely amazing. So the next one, and we don't have to go through all of these, but like there's a lot of them that I thought were really, really awesome. He says use TDD. Have either of you used TDD before? Well, Peyton, you said you had done Ruby development, so
yeah, that's actually where I learned it. Was RSpec. That was my introduction to testing, and as a result, now I try to bring that model to every language I'm writing.
Yeah.
But there are times when there's plenty of times when I don't use it. So I'm generally a very big test advocate.
Yeah.
At least test, if not TDD.
Yeah. I was really. It was really amazing. My previous team, we were given a lot of freedom to do whatever we wanted because we delivered. And so when you deliver things, then they let you do whatever you want to do. So we were able to. We did a lot of pair programming with TDD, and it was a really amazing experience. I had never done any pair programming before that, and all the managers and everybody was like, "Oh my God, or the amount of stuff we're going to get done is going to decrease by half." And everybody was freaking out when we started doing it, and then we actually got faster, and the code that we were writing was better and bug free, and it was a really, really amazing experience, and I'd recommend for anybody.
Agreed.
So. Have you done any remote pairing at Automatic?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
I have done it. I don't. It's not often, but I definitely have. Uh, we have some projects in my team where there's quite a lot of complexity, and different people have expertise in different areas of it, of that complexity, and so it's been really helpful to. I mean, it's not, we weren't like, okay, let's start a pair programming session. It was more like, oh, hey, can you help me with this thing? And I'll share my screen, and then one person is coding, the other person is just kind of helping. But I mean, that's what pair programming is. So it's not formal. Like a lot of things, I think at Automatic, we don't have like formal development. Most teams don't have formal development structures, but we tend to sort of re-implement them anyway.
Yep.
And yeah, it's been very helpful. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I don't know if it's like an all the time thing, but I've definitely done it. And also, I recommend that. Even if one person is just like watching sort of as a learning experience, like I think it's so valuable.
Yeah. So when we were doing that, we were usually doing a senior and a more junior developer, as we had a couple on the team. And for the junior developers, that they really learned and leveled up so quickly, and that was amazing. And also, we had one junior developer who was all about using Vim, and so for me, I'll use Vim to edit commit messages and edit a file on the fly, but using Vim and all the associated tools and things like that was a really amazing experience. And so I'll some days I'll just use Vim as my full-fledged editor for all the things. I still love Atom, but it gave me a new perspective on it, that it was more powerful than the way I was using it. So.
Yeah, I knew a guy that used Vim as a full-blown IDE.
Yeah, so and I basically use Vim for everything.
Yeah, it's amazing how much like you can add in. We had to talk with each other and come to a compromise, and all use the same dot files because we were pairing so much. And set it up to switch profiles, because there's one person that said, "No way, I'm going to use my own thing," and we all tried to compromise to go to his thing. But yeah, he just had to set it. We either had to not use his computer, or we had to log into a separate user to like use his computer, because his stuff was so wacky.
I mostly code in Vim, but often when I'm screen sharing, I'll use Atom, especially if we're using something like Screen Hero, which is, I think, the best tool for this sort of thing. Because you can share, you can actually use the other person's computer. Yeah. And in those cases, yeah, Vim can be a liability, even if both people know how to use Vim, because like you said, I mean, my Vim is so heavily customized. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you used Tmux at all?
Yeah, and I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't really used it for sharing sessions. I know you can do that.
Yeah, that was something that became really useful as we had, because of tax implications or something. One of the developers went remote for 3 months, and so we set up Tmux, and we were using that to pair using the same session. Yeah. So we are officially out of time, but I wanted to say one more of the points from Eric Elliott. It's be positive and stop complaining. I think that's awesome. And if you find yourself like feeling really negative or feeling in the dumps, like think in your head, find something positive and say it out loud, because it'll change your whole perspective. I've been doing that for the last 6 months, and having a baby and having a job and trying to juggle all the different things. Like, if you're negative about that whole experience, God, I don't know how you make it. But if you think about the positives, it completely changes your whole perspective. So
Cool.
I think Peyton froze. Same time next week.
Sure.
Sure.
See y'all.